Okay, you might have heard the chime. The recording's in progress. Thank you everyone for joining us tonight for a presentation about Colleen Moore's Fairy Castles. I'll introduce briefly Margaret. I'll let her introduce herself in just a moment. Just some little housekeeping things you might have noticed as you come into the program. You're muted and cameras off by default. Being muted helps with the quality of the program. Cameras off can just help, as far as distractions. That way you don't have to worry about what you're wearing and what's in the background or anything like that. And I do find that if your camera is off, as well as the sound or either or, it can help with the clarity of the presentation, kind of like the streaming, the pictures and stuff like that too. So it kind of helps with like that bandwidth. We'll save questions for the end. In the meantime, you certainly can put anything in the chat as we go along, and then we'll follow up at the end of the presentation. We got a few more coming in. Good crowd. And those who are just joining us in this last moment, you haven't missed much. There will be a recording available, which I'll email out to the registrants, and we'll look to see if we can share that as far as out to some of our patrons, maybe through an email newsletter. And by default, your camera's off and microphones are off, just to help with the clarity and the quality of the program. Save questions for the end. You can put them in the chat, either to the group or to me directly, and we'll follow up with that. And let's see here. So, well, I have everyone's attention. My name's Athens Marino. I'm, part of the adult service team here at the Carroll Street Public Library. So thanks for joining us this evening. It should be a very relaxing and informative kind of adventure, if you will, to learn more about the fairy castles, and a couple of heads up about some things going on at the library. In December, it gets a little bit quiet as far as some programs and things of that nature because of the holidays, but we do have a fun interactive memory wall that's right next to the adult service desk, where we encourage you to come on in, share a recipe or a memory, and we'll be putting it on kind of like this big poster board so that way everyone can kind of see some of the memorable moments that are being shared among others in the community. Looking ahead to the spring, those who are interested in advancing or furthering their career, or looking to establish new skills, or those who are small business owners, entrepreneurs, will have a series starting in the spring that can help learn skills for those who are looking to advance their career, learn new job skills. That'll be launching in the spring, so look for something related to careers in small business. And then a fun project that one of my coworkers will be starting also in the spring will be a spice club, where every month there'll be a different spice offering with recipes, and that might lead to kind of like, networking events and things like that throughout the spring and summer. So some fun things on the docket. And of course, after tonight, if I don't see you for a while for our next program, I do hope everyone has a safe and wonderful holiday season and new year. So without further ado, there's no initial questions. Good. I'll turn it over to Margaret, who will introduce herself. And once again, questions we'll save for the end. But by all means, I'm here throughout the duration of the program. So if you need something, put it in the chat. And again, my name is Athens. So, okay, you're all set there, Margaret. Take it away.
Hi, everyone. Good evening. My apologies for a little froggy throat. I caught a cold and I'm just recovering. So I've got my water and I've got my fairy dust, and we're all set. So I'd like to introduce you to the fairy castle in a completely different view and a completely different angle. We come across this April 2018 date. The sort of origin story of this PowerPoint presentation was that the Museum of Science and Industry was invited by Macy's on State Street in early 2018 to perform at their annual flower show. The flower show's theme that year was fairies, and the marketing team said, okay, Margaret, you worked on this project back in 2013 into 2014. We want you to do this presentation and go to Macy's. I kind of chuckled and I thought, oh my goodness, I am back of the house. I am in the closet with the artifacts. I'm not meant for show. However, I loved working on this project. My tenureship at the Museum of Science and Industry was 15 years as the head curator, and during which time I was privileged enough to work on a plethora of projects, not the least of which were the U505 conservation project, um, uh, my goodness, the exhibit, Science Storms, and of course the Colleen Moore Fairy Castle, to name a few. So I created this with a team of experts. My partner in this was the staff photographer, JB Spector, who photographed these absolutely exquisite photos for you this evening. This is really the star of the show, his photography. We're going to be going into the home unlike anyone else. So during the time in which you would go to the museum, you would be able to see this through the glass partition, through the glass case. However, tonight we are visiting the fairy castle as if we are 5 inches tall, and we are going to go into the nooks and crannies into which you would never be able to see when you go back to the museum. The fairy castle sits approximately 9 feet by 11 feet tall. It weighs over a ton, which is approximately 3,000 pounds, inside of which are 1,500 miniature collectibles or artifacts that Colleen Moore collected throughout her lifetime. The fairy castle is fabricated with aluminum and stainless steel infrastructure, like a skeletal infrastructure, and module rooms that were meant to be taken apart and put back together again. We see these beautiful images. They're crystal clear, hopefully on your screen. There's me. I sort of threw this in for just kind of a fun thing that legitimizes why I'm giving this presentation. This is one of the projects that I was working on during my tenureship, and it was just an amazing opportunity. And I was in charge of all of the miniature artifacts, which is separate from the castle infrastructure, and we'll go through that. I begin with this beautiful quote: "The fairy castle represents the timeless magic of illusion, the realities of make-believe, and perhaps a stimulus for other castle builders." That was a quote by one of our longest running presidents, Major Lennox Lore. He would have been the president who brought us the U505 from the United States Senate and the United States Navy, along with many of the automobile collection that the museum holds still today. And in particular, he courted Colleen Moore to give the Museum of Science and Industry her beloved fairy castle. We start with Colleen. Who is Colleen? Colleen to us is something like a Meryl Streep, a Julia Roberts, Michelle Pfeiffer. She was born in the early turn of the last century, in the early zeros of the 1900s in Minnesota. She was very close with her mother and father and her grandparents. She had always enjoyed building dollhouses with her father, who was an architect, and her mother would inspire her with different design choices and promote her creative side. When she was a little bit older, Colleen, as a young girl, went out to Hollywood to seek fortune and fame and became a silent movie actress. One of her most pivotal roles was Ella Cinder, which sort of kind of tipped her into that higher echelon of being a fantastic star, very successful in her time period. She is accredited to have created what we call the flapper girl. She lobbed off her hair. She cut down her skirt so that it was above her knees. You could see those sexy little ankles of hers. And she actually started this entire phase of this women empowerment in business and the arts. This is just a fun little GIF that for some of my audience, maybe some don't know what a flapper is. Somebody, a woman who embodies her power, her femininity, the spark and the sizzle that only women can do. And this is just the penultimate independence and 1920s vibe that we want to encourage. Colleen, as I said, was an incredibly talented and important star in her time. She was one of the 8th celebrities, famous actors, who received the honor of having her signature out in front of the Chinese Grauman Theater in Hollywood, California. So when you go out there, you can actually see Colleen Moore's handprints, footprints, next to stars like Rudolph Valentino and the like, with other very famous early pre-talkie silent movie stars. As I said, she was deeply and greatly influenced and supported by her parents. Her father was incredibly just a wonderful muse for her. And like I said, she and her father would spend hours building doll houses. And he actually was the contributor of her very first miniature artifact, which was in fact the Holy Bible, the smallest Bible to be printed onto a very small pieces of paper. We see that her influence was worldwide. Some of the most important people of her time, such as Harold Grieve, was one of the famous Hollywood interior designers. Henry Froelich, lighting designing. Today we know that lighting does everything. You know, the IMG, the lighting and sound from Lucasfilms, Pixar, they can't do their magic without lighting design. This young, hardworking guy named Walt Disney, we hope he does well. She and Walt were close friends. And of course, William Randolph Hearst. He actually fabricated and built his own castle out in Northern California. Colleen was a frequent visitor and guest of William Randolph Hearst's castle. I actually went there when I was a child and saw an actual solid gold toilet seat. And I thought, wow, one day I'm going to make it. Maybe not the aspiration I should have, but this is it. So very important and very well connected people with whom Colleen was friends and had access to. And we talk about the inspiration or the impetus for the fabrication and creation of the dollhouse, the fairy castle. During filming of one of Colleen's films, she was injured on set, which made her have to stay in the hospital for over 2 months, during which time she saw the firsthand blight of children and families who, while the children were in the hospital, families would be destroyed with bills and sadness and not very much cheer. They didn't have a lot of money. This is the time in which the country was on the precipice of falling into the Great Depression, and people were scared and things of that nature were very tenuous. So Colleen chose to use her celebrity and her fortune to raise funds for children's charities. Seen here in the middle is a beautiful example of how Colleen embraced children and welcomed them into her fairy world. She fabricated the castle along with the designers and the carpentry and artists from around the world who were very well known in the Hollywood filmmaking scene. She traveled the castle from town to town for over 10 years. At the time she completed the fabrication and the building of the castle in around 1935. So here we are during the height of the Great American Depression, and the castle traveled and raised over, in today's money, would be $3 million, which is an incredible amount considering that the world was under the Great Depression. The museum has in its collection several crates that originally traveled with the castle. So the castle was stored in these crates. It was taken down and put back together again, town after town. There was a designated crew of men, about 10 men, who would put the castle together and then install the miniature artifacts therein. Trains would travel from city to city, and if the team would do a certain above and beyond thing for Colleen, they would receive this beautiful little Goofus Award, which was platinum or silver. And it was a very special award to achieve during that time. The castle took about 3 years to create, design, and fabricate, and it toured, like I said, for around 10 years. Now, how did the castle arrive at the Museum of Science and Industry? I often say that the umbrella under which science lays are categories of model making and fabrication, technological advancements like engineering, the craftsmanship that it takes to combine different metals and different structures to be able to withstand the bulk and the weight during its travel and during its tour and when it was on display. The major, as I mentioned earlier, was the president of the museum, and he kind of stalked Colleen and went to certain fundraisers, and one of which was in New York City. He learned, Lennox Lore, that Colleen would be returning to Chicago in the mid 1930s and early 40s, I should say. And he went to a luncheon in Chicago, approached her and said, "Ms. Moore, you need to have your castle at our Museum of Science and Industry." And she thought, this man, I don't know who he is, but I like his chutzpah. So Colleen, in her very smart mind, said, "You, sir, can have my castle as long as," and she spelled out very specific guidelines that allowed the museum to host and take care of her castle during her lifetime. But it was very tricky, and I'll get into that. So it was on display. It started on display in 1949. So this is the fun part. We are going to go on a tour, and we're going to pretend as if we are 5 inches tall, and we're going to see things that you can't see anywhere else. So exciting. Come with me. We begin in the heart. That is the garden. The garden, we are walking around and we can feel the gravel underneath our feet. We can hear the rocking of the weeping willow in the middle, and we can hear the cradle rocking back and forth in the tree. The tinkling of the water features and the bronze fountains surrounding us. And looking up, we can see the hand-painted pieces of tin on which there are stories from Colleen's childhood that she would have listened from her father and mother, Aesop's fables and the Brothers Grimm, Frank Baum with The Wizard of Oz, this beautiful bas-relief. The detail, the pops of color. We now know that if we step back, they're approximately this size, but because we're 5 inches tall, they look like they're real life, and we get to see them in a different perspective. Now we're going to peek into the library. Now, Colleen, when she would take this tour with children, she would say to them, now, children, when we go into these rooms, I want you to imagine that the fairies have just left, and they've left things out like their books and their toys and their games because they're very scared. So let's be quiet, but we're going to sneak around. We go in and we pop into the library where we see the motif of under the sea, this beautiful hand-painted constellation in the dome. And we walk on the hand-applied, the absolutely immaculate walnut and mahogany flooring. And we pop out and we see the mural of Robin and his merry men, I should say. Just the pops of color, just exquisite. We walk around and we can take anything we want off these shelves. Ladies and gentlemen, none of these artifacts are nailed down or glued down. They're actually hand placed one by one, which Colleen herself would year round come back into the museum, play with things, change things around, maybe remove something or put it back. We, because we're 5 inches tall, can go over to the bookshelf, open any book, and there's print, teeny tiny print on everything. It's amazing. Some of the materials that we're looking at are bone, onyx, gold. There's porcelain and also tusk or elephant ivory. These beautiful hand-painted murals on the wall. We see the Gulliver's Travels that are the sculptures that are above the door, the flickering of the fireplace, and all the books upon which we can sit on the belly, the reading sofas and recliners. We can open them up and we can see miniature photographs of Buckingham Palace, and we can read books such as this one. This is called the autograph book. Colleen would often carry with her tiny scraps of paper on her person, and whenever she met someone of note from the early 20th century, she would ask them for their autograph. Folks like Orville Wright and Herbert Hoover, Albert Einstein, Eleanor Roosevelt. Some of my favorites are Leonard Bernstein, the very first line from the West Side Story, Tonight, beautiful. Julia Child actually wrote a recipe for baked chicken within this miniature book. It is such a prized piece of the castle that it doesn't even, it's not on display inside of the castle. It's actually inside a vault, inside of the artifact storage area, because it is legitimately priceless. It's remarkable. There's a funny story that Colleen was desperate to get Pablo Picasso's autograph. And through a woman that worked for Colleen, they knew the driver of Picasso, approached the driver, asked on Colleen's behalf for Picasso's autograph. And that too is in this autograph book. It's incredible. To kind of give you a perspective, these books are approximately the size of a quarter, a dime, and a penny. Here we're seeing on the screen is the author who wrote Tarzan, wrote this Tarzan Jr. specifically for Colleen Moore's Fairy Castle in the library. It's incredible, the detail. Now we leave the library and we pop over into this sort of breezeway and we see the story of Noah and his ark. We climb up the stairs and we peek into Ali Baba and the 40 Thieves and the Cave of the Treasures. Within this treasure trove are both real and fake gems. When you go back to the museum, hopefully you will soon, you can poke your head as close as you could get with the glass in front of you and see which is real and which is fake. Hint, the real sparkles underneath the brilliant light, and the fake is a dull sheen. So it's pretty cool that they're both real and fake. We go back down into the chapel. Now, Colleen was all about community, celebrating diversity, bringing people together, welcoming everybody. So the chapel is not necessarily a Christian homage or something that reflects Christianity specifically. It actually celebrates all religions, Buddhist, Taoist, Judaism. There's a mezuzah on the wall that's nailed in as it's supposed to be. There is said to be a piece of the original cross from Jesus's cross from the hill. There is actually a papal stamp carved ivory sculpture that's approximately this big that was used in Vatican City, that was gifted to Colleen during her collecting years and is actually on display within the chapel. Now, because we are 5 inches tall, we get to walk around. I just want to point out that during the time in which the castle toured the United States, the organ would have played. There are multiple books dedicated to music, and several of them were hymns, pieces of music that Colleen would have listened to during her lifetime, things that were famous, things that were popular. You can see sort of at the bottom of the screen, towards the back or the foreground, the papal stamp that I mentioned earlier. And we can walk into the nave and see these floor to ceiling, handmade stained glass windows that feature stories from the Bible. We see Moses in the reeds, Daniel battling Goliath and David and Goliath, and Daniel in the lion's den. These exquisite photographs were shot and created for you by an extremely talented photographer, but you get to see it tonight. Now we poke into the Great Hall, otherwise known as the Museum of the Fairy Castle. This absolutely gorgeous space houses some of the pieces of artwork that Colleen had commissioned and was given to her by several famous friends, not the least of which was Walt Disney. Towards the back, in the background, there is a painting of Minnie and Mickey dressed up as medieval prince and princess. We see this beautiful hand-carved ivory sculpture, and the two knights in the background were given to Colleen by her colleague or her teammate, Rudolph Valentino, who himself had a small miniature collection. And as part of that, he gave this to Colleen to put into her castle for eternity, forever. We look up and then we see these absolutely beautiful paintings on the ceiling. We could never see this from the outside, only because we are on tour today with me. Colleen actually wrote her own fairy tale, wherein an evil witch cursed down the young couple of the princess and prince. She, the witch, cursed the prince himself and turned him into a polar bear. So you see the princess riding the polar bear, and then these whimsical depictions of other fairy tales. Here's the prince and the princess riding off on the steed, the stallion. The princess looking out into the glorious, I call it sort of the sunrise. That always brings you hope. We see on the balcony, which is a peek into the prince's bedroom. You can just imagine them peering down onto them, calling down onto the museum floor or the Great Hall floor. Again, these exquisite, beautiful murals that are hand painted on the ceiling of the Great Hall. This gorgeous Hansel and Gretel and the gingerbread house. The pops of color. Think of it. It was created 1930, completed in approximately 1931. Over 2 years to create. Now we leave the Great Hall and we enter into the drawing room. The drawing room's motif or style is early Cinderella. The Cinderella theme is peppered throughout this room. Please note the rose quartz flooring that are hand laid, the little tiny squares of rose quartz, just exquisite materials. There's platinum, there is stainless steel, there is pewter and silver. Here we see the detailed painting of Cinderella running after the coach that turned into a pumpkin. A closer look at the rose quartz flooring. Back in the background, we see this a gorgeous piece of alabaster and jade and another precious material, which of course is failing my brain right now, which was given to Colleen by the Dowager Princess of China. We see this beautiful mural of Cinderella running from the ball. A hand-carved miniature sculpture made out of ivory, and the needle and thread used to create the embroidery on these chairs and the step stool or the footstool are so incredibly small. It takes a true artist to have created these precious, one-of-a-kind treasures. And whenever we see Rose, this is Colleen's memorial to her mother. This beautiful rose sits upon a caryatid silver table, upon which also sits a blade, a shaving razor that is an homage to her father. It is a mother of pearl inlay with an actual sharp knife for the straight edge. Then you see on the side a hand-carved pipe, and that's a beautiful memorial to her father as well. and then a real working Jack-in-the-Box. And yes, I played with it because I was in charge of all the miniatures during the 2013-2014 conservation exhibit project. You can press down upon the Jack-in-the-Box, turn it, and it pops. Super cute. At times, when I was reinstalling the artifacts inside of the castle, I would have to wear a mask lest I breathed in one of the artifacts. True story. Now we go up the stairs and we see the beautiful room of the prince's bedroom and bathroom. This is sort of a combination of Scandinavian and late 19th century, early 20th century Russian storytelling time with the blues and the greens and the reds. We see Hans Christian Andersen's skates that are solid gold. On top of the bed lies the sword of Excalibur that was once in a stone during the time in which the castle toured. The dresser towards the front holds a movable globe that has a solid gold stand, and then there is a small Civil War era gun that is also solid gold. Now, I show to you the prince, otherwise known as the polar bear. The polar bear is in fact the pelt of an ermine, which is the family of rodents such as minks and my goodness, muskrat. Then the head is actually a taxidermied mouse and the mouse teeth. So it's both an ermine and a mouse. So no polar bear was harmed in the creation of the polar bear rug. By the way, that's the prince. So we are meant to cheer on the prince and the princess and banish the spell that the evil witch placed upon those two to free the prince from the polar bear pelt. We go into this absolutely stunning bathroom. We see real jade from China. We can see in the background, or just imagine soaking in that tub with the water running. During the time in which it toured and for a number of years on display at the museum, there was actually running water. I'll go into a little bit more detail about how the museum decided to stop the actual water running through the house in order to stabilize and preserve for future generations. But now we can just pretend to wash our hands in that. Now it's time to go into the princess's bedroom and bathroom. The jewels that you see here are from Colleen's own collection, from her grandparents, and from her actual jewels, her collection, when she was a famous star. This beautiful motif is sort of like a Cinderella Sleeping Beauty dream. The floors are of an opalescent, beautiful, hand-laid sort of the chevron style layout. It's just absolutely exquisite. Materials such as platinum and diamonds and rubies and emeralds were used. These are actually Colleen's dress pins. They're clips that a woman would wear on their chest, their décolletage. And Colleen sought a very famous and highly talented craftsman or jeweler in Boston and had him extend the legs from the original dress clips, put it onto the enameled green, and then brought down the fabric or the material of the platinum and the real diamond encrusted legs. We see here another beautiful memory nod to Colleen's mother on the ivory tea set, upon which is a beautiful little gold fan that one would use while sitting there drinking tea. And that is an ivory table. Now we see the beautiful canopy bed. If you look closer, you can see that it's a spider web, which is representative of Sleeping Beauty when she was covered with the spider web and she slept for 100 years. Next to her, she would have been able to pull down onto the communication system, if you will, sort of the early texting, to maybe get some treats while she hung out in the bed. Then you see the tall case clock, during which time of the touring, all of the clocks were actually working and in sync. One of the many duties of the men, aka the Goofus Club, that toured with the castle, maintained the castle, and provided services and stabilization of the castle during the tour in the 1930s. We look up and we see this beautiful hand-painted mural on the ceiling of the princess's bedroom. The bejeweled candelabra are made from necklaces and pearls given to her by Colleen's grandmother, her beloved grandmother, who would have taken her out to Hollywood all those years ago. And please take note of the teeny tiny miniature light bulbs. During the time in which it traveled and for many, many years at the museum, each light bulb was individually maintained, removed if it was burned out, and replaced. Now, remember how I said that all of the artifacts within the castle are not glued down and not nailed down. So one would have to go in, remove the half of a size of a piece of rice sized light bulb, remove that from the switch or from the lamp, remove it without damaging any of the artifacts. Try doing that. Ugh, I mean, can you imagine after a long day at work, coming home to this beautiful soaking tub, and we can hear just the beautiful sounds of the water flowing, the beautiful Art Deco design of this room, and so many different Easter eggs, little treats that we see, the number of roses that we see inside, just again, lovingly to her mother. Every single piece, any of the artifacts here are able to be plucked and played with and touched, if you're Colleen. We go down the stairs into the dining room. Here is where you're going to see the influence of William Randolph Hearst's dining room, back when we saw the earlier slide. William Randolph Hearst had a similar dining room with these beautiful exposed beam ceiling, under which it was the original lighting, electrical lighting unit. And we see that this is an homage to the Knights of the Round Table. These hand-stitched, embroidered tapestries were commissioned by Colleen by an embroiderer artist in Italy. And during the time in which I presented at different libraries in 2018, many people who were who embroidered for a hobby or for a profession often remarked how exquisite and how delicate a person would have to be in order to make such a teeny tiny stitch. So these are one-of-a-kind tapestries. Sitting on top of the Knights of the Round Table are solid gold cutlery, salt and pepper shakers, tea service, pewter wine goblets, and silver chargers or plates. When I talked about how I was in charge of the artifacts, the tiny little tin knives, forks, and spoons are all hand placed by me after the conservation project of 2014. We go in now to the kitchen. This is the most whimsical part of the fairy castle. We see here little Miss Muffet sat on her tuffet, eating her curds and whey. The artifacts, or the collection of miniatures that Colleen traveled the world and spanned her lifetime of bringing them and putting them into the castle as she wanted. Different places and different people. My own heritage is Mexican, and the pops of color, the pottery that we see here, are from a region called Oaxaca in Mexico, where Colleen went and saw pottery craftsmen and artists, and she commissioned these miniature pieces of pots. And I just love them. They're so beautiful. The detail of all the little dishes and the plates that are made of porcelain and china, of some are tin, some are solid gold, some are just brass. The pops of color, this rich, deep, saturated orange, and this beautiful green. How fun and whimsical that would be to cook a meal in. And we end our miniature tour with 40 blackbirds baked in a pie. Now we jump into conserving a classic. Due to the stress and the inherent, basically the inherentness of any artifact is to deteriorate. So given the fact that the castle itself traveled for more than 10 years, over 80 plus years ago, the fact that the infrastructure was fabricated on a Hollywood lot in the late 1920s, early 1930s, this old castle had its wear and tears. We're not going to lie about that. So it was necessary to do a full press effort to stabilize, clean, and make sure that the castle was prepped for another full 80, 100 years. That being said, we hired professional conservators who by trade are not only scientists, they're chemists, they're engineers, but they're also artists in themselves. Here we see Jane, who's working on the cradle from the cradle rocking in the tree. In the background is Maria working on a piece of the structure of the castle. We set up tables and chairs and put all of the elements, of which there were hundreds of pieces that make up the whole castle, and put them on shelves and had a guest-facing exhibit so that people were able to ask questions, see how the conservators worked and preserved these pieces of the castle. Specifically here, Bojana is a paper conservator, wherein she works specifically on this project with the book collection from the library. To give you a perspective, this is how detailed she would be for over 50, 60 books of this size during Christmas around the world and the holiday of lights. Crazy. This is Maria, who is cleaning the constellation mural above the library. She's popped in to the Great Hall to replace the gold leaf paint on the stair and the pillar. And Dorota, when something was broken because of the wear and tear, we would photograph it, document it. They would come in with replaceable material that would connect to the original pieces and help to stabilize the original infrastructure and integrity of the castle. Inez here is showing a little girl just the tiny details of the fairy world. This little girl, actually, this is such a fabulous story. Inez was working one day and this little girl came up to her and she said, "If there's anything left over, can you give it to me?" And Inez leaned over, she winked at the little girl, she picked up probably like a little piece of clay and gave it to the girl and she said, "Shh, don't tell anybody." And that's the little girl's expression. It's just fantastic. I love it so much. So beautiful. So these are some of the before and afters. Some of you may have collections of your own in your home. Light, water, touch. Some of these things are very detrimental to an artifact. We also do something that is different from conservation is stabilization of the existing piece. Restoration is the replacement of an original piece in order to maintain the integrity. You might hear that from when people say that they restored an antique car, for example. This is my spirit animal. This is the sprite who sits atop the Great Hall. So during the time in which it was on display at the museum for many years, many decades, it was common practice that if something were to chip away by virtue of it being older, getting older, one would go ahead and overpaint. And so it was common practice, many museums did this, would overpaint, in this case, kind of a pea green. However, when we contracted the professional conservators, they are able to remove that overpaint and uncover the original color and glee of the sprite who welcomes visitors to the castle. A couple of examples of what I talked about, replacing the original water features for acrylic molds, maintaining and stabilizing the castle because water is very dangerous for an artifact. And here, I hope this goes without a hitch. It's this fantastic video of the reassembly of the castle. Please enjoy. Nope, nope, darn it, dagnabbit. Nope, we don't want that. We want to go back. Please enjoy. I love that. Never ceases to amaze me. I leave you with this thought. If you believe in your dreams will come to life. I want to thank you, and I want to thank Colleen for this evening's presentation. Thank you.
Nice. Fascinating. I found myself moving closer to the screen to see all the little details of stuff. So, wow, very interesting. Yeah, please get a drink of water there. Okay. It's like I gotta see it in person. I gotta like rewatch this recording again and kind of pause certain things and almost kind of like gotta look up things myself after this. So very informative, and thank you. I think what a great way to experience this is to see it like in this little virtual tour as if we're a little 5-inch person. So I'll open it up. Any questions? Let me go ahead and stop the recording so that we don't have to feel like you're going to be on camera or anything like that if you wanted to speak or whatnot. I'll do that right now.